I never intended to be in that building again, let alone wearing a name tag with a crooked smile printed underneath. The only reason I even RSVP'd was because Marcus, my former supervisor and one of the few people who didn't treat me like I was, Glass back then reached out personally and said, "Come on, Alden. It's been years. Everyone would love to see you. Everyone." What a word. I still don't know if he meant it. The venue hadn't changed. Same dim lighting. Same fake enthusiasm behind the catered hors d'oeuvres. Same glossy. 2 white floors that somehow made you feel like you were always being watched. It was the annual corporate mixer. 3 floors of the Hensley Group packed into one hotel ballroom with overpriced champagne and a rented DJ who didn't care what anyone wanted to hear. I was standing near the back, fiddling with the condensation on my glass of ginger ale, when I felt the air shift. I didn't see her walk in. I felt it. That sharp pull in my gut, like when you trip in a dream and jolt awake. I turned my head out. Of instinct, and there she was, in a forest green dress I had never seen before. Her hands still did that thing where she tucked her hair behind her left ear when she was nervous. I'd seen it 100 times, and for some reason, I thought I was ready. I wasn't. When we were married, her name was Rowan Lark. Most people just called her Ro. I used to call her Roanoke because she had this way of disappearing, emotionally before she ever left physically. By the end, I was begging for scraps of affection, like some pathetic guy who didn't understand he was already out of the picture. But I did understand. I understood too late. She hadn't seen me yet. I could have left, slipped out into the hallway, maybe claimed I wasn't feeling well. God knows that would have been believable. But something stopped me. Not anger, not pride, just exhaustion. I was tired of being the one who always turned away, so I stayed. Tabled behind me and pretended to look through the event booklet, even though my eyes were flicking up every 3 seconds. She laughed once at something a man said beside her, and I hated that laugh. Not because it was ugly, but because it used to belong to me. I used to be the reason for that sound. Now it felt like it had been reissued like an old credit card. Number reassigned to someone else. Eventually she turned. Maybe she felt it too. Her gaze scanned lazily across the room before catching mine, and then her whole face collapsed. Not in the dramatic soap opera way. No, this was worse. She blinked hard, like she didn't trust her vision. Her lips parted slightly, her arm lowered as if her drink had suddenly become too heavy to hold. And then, in the middle of the room, with people laughing and music playing and glasses clinking, she started crying. I didn't move. I couldn't. Oh, my whole body was rooted to the floor, like my shoes had melted into the marble. People noticed. A couple glanced at her, then at me, then back at her again, as if trying to piece together a puzzle they didn't know they were part of. One woman whispered something into her husband's ear and subtly stepped away. I felt exposed, like my skin had been peeled off and left open in the air. It took her several minutes before she walked over, and even then her steps were hesitant, broken up by long pauses like she was bracing for something. When she stood in front of me, she didn't say my name. She just whispered, "I didn't think you'd come." I didn't reply right away. My throat was tight. Always does that when I'm trying not to say something I'll regret. What could I have said anyway? "You look good?" I used to know that heartbeat. I recognized the scent of your skin, even from across the room. Instead, I said the only thing that came to mind. I almost didn't. And she nodded, like she understood exactly why. But what she said next, that's what changed everything. That's the moment I knew this night wasn't going to be simple. She leaned in slightly, lowered her voice, and said, "He doesn't know I'm here." I blinked. "Who?" She swallowed hard. "The man I left you for." I wish I could say I handled it with grace that I nodded calmly and let her explain herself, but that's not who I was back then. I was the guy who overthought everything, the guy who stood in the toothpaste aisle for 10 minutes, trying to decide between whitening and sensitive, because I couldn't even trust myself to make the right call anymore. I had become that version of myself because of her. Maybe if I'm being honest, I was always that guy. She just held up the mirror. I looked at her for a full 10 seconds after she said it. "The man I left you for doesn't know I'm here," the sentence echoed in my head like it had been carved into the room itself. My stomach twisted. Her presence at the mixer already didn't make sense. She'd never cared much about corporate events back when we were together. She used to fake migraines just to get out of them. So now she was back, not just showing up, but showing up alone, crying, saying he didn't know. I set my drink down, my hand shaking just slightly. Why would that matter? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. She hesitated. Her eyes darted around like she was searching for an answer among the strangers. Because I shouldn't be here. I didn't reply, waited. She always hated that when I go silent instead of react. It made her nervous. I used to think it was a power thing. Now I think maybe she just hated having to face herself. Finally, she sighed and looked down. I know what you're thinking. I let out a bitter laugh. That would be a first. She flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. And maybe a small, messed up part of me was glad. I needed her to know she didn't get to glide back into my life like nothing happened. 3 years, Rowan, I said quietly. You haven't messaged, emailed? Not even a forwarded meme. You disappeared like I was some accident you survived. I wanted to reach out, but you didn't. Because I couldn't, she snapped suddenly, then caught herself, lowering her voice. Because I wasn't allowed to. That stopped me. Allowed, I repeated. She looked away. It's complicated. It always is with you. The bitterness was back in. My throat now, thick and sour. I turned to walk away. Not because I was trying to make some dramatic exit, but because I genuinely couldn't stand to hear another cryptic half-truth wrapped in guilt. I was halfway across the room before I heard her footsteps behind me. Hurried now, her heels clicking unevenly like she was tripping over her own regret. Alden, please, can we talk? I didn't stop walking. I was scared. She said behind me. I stopped, turned around. You, I said. You were scared? I was the one who came home to an empty dresser. I was the one who found your wedding ring sitting on the sink next to a handwritten note with a coffee stain on it. I was the one who had to explain to my mother why my wife vanished after booking a couple's retreat in Arizona. Don't you dare. Tell me about scared. She looked down, ashamed.
How?
I didn't plan it that way. No, I muttered. You just didn't care enough to plan anything else. We stood in silence, and slowly people began to look away, sensing the tension and turning there. Attention back to their conversations. It was like we were fading out of the present, dissolving into a moment that only belonged to the two of us. I came tonight because I thought maybe I could say it, she said finally. Say what? She lifted her eyes. There was a glint of something in them I hadn't seen in years. Not sadness, not guilt, something worse. Honesty that I was wrong. I laughed again, but it wasn't amused. Which part? Leaving me, or who you left me for? She hesitated, then whispered both. My mouth went dry. I could hear the air conditioning above us, humming like static. I blinked at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to add, but things are different now, or he hurt me, or one of the dozen things she might say to explain away her choices. But she didn't. She just stood there, like she was daring me to ask. So I did. What happened, Ro? She took a shaky breath. He promised me a new life. Said you were holding me back. Told me I had become boring, predictable. Said that the best parts of me were buried under routine, and that if I left I'd finally breathe again. And did you? I asked. Breathe? She looked me straight in the eye. No, I drowned. That broke something inside me. Not because I wanted her pain, but because that pain had once been mine. And now it was just floating between us like smoke from a fire we both pretended never happened. She stepped closer. I didn't come here to get you back. Then why are you here? Because I needed to see what I threw away. I needed to see that you were okay. Or better than okay. I hoped you'd moved on. But when I saw you standing there, God, Alden, you looked like you meant something, like you belonged. I guess I just didn't expect it to hurt this much. I shook my head. It's not your hurt to feel anymore. And then she said the last thing I expected. I never told him about you, about who you were, about what I did. I stared at her. You mean he doesn't know you were married? No, she whispered. He doesn't even know your name. My entire spine stiffened. Why would you hide that? Because if he knew, he'd know what I lost. And just like that, I realized this night was going to rip through more than just old memories. It was going to uncover things I never saw coming. I didn't say anything for a long time. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring at her, while everything she just confessed started crawling under my skin, pulling apart whatever piece I'd been pretending to have these last few years. It was like she reached straight into my chest and cracked open everything I had sealed shut. She never told him my name. Not that she was married, not that she had destroyed a man in the process of finding herself, or whatever it was she called it back then, so to him, I didn't exist. I was a ghost, she exercised before she moved into her new chapter. It shouldn't have mattered. I kept telling myself that. I mean, what difference did it make now? She was gone. I was rebuilding. I did. My own place, a job I didn't hate, a cat that didn't judge me when I talked to myself in the kitchen. Hell, I'd even been on a few dates, though most of them ended with awkward silences and the realization that I couldn't stop comparing everyone to a woman who'd already erased me from her narrative, but knowing she never even mentioned me, that made something in my stomach churn. You think hiding me makes it better? I asked finally. It's like pretending I didn't exist somehow absolves you? She shook her head, stepping closer. It wasn't about absolution. It was about shame. You felt shame? I scoffed. When, before or after you walked out without a word? I didn't know how to explain what I'd done. I was with you for almost 7 years, Alden. You were. She stopped, as if choking on the word. You were safe, good, kind, and I wanted more. I laughed bitterly. You mean you wanted someone more exciting, more dangerous, or willing to whisper things you wanted to believe about yourself? She nodded slowly, said I could be anything, that I'd spent too long living like I was in someone else's skin, that he could make me feel alive again. And did he? Rowan hesitated. Her voice dropped. For a little while, I looked at her hard. She was unraveling in front of me, her makeup slightly smudged now, her voice cracking in places I'd never heard before. He told me I was luminous. She continued. He said I had fire in me and that you just didn't see it. I started to believe him. I needed to. I needed to feel like I was still worth something, that I hadn't become this predictable shadow of myself. And so I left. I traded love for a spark. But sparks burn out, Alden, and when they do, you're just left in the dark. I don't know why that hit me the way it did. Maybe because I had imagined her life was perfect. Photos of wine glasses on balconies. Some smug-looking guy with his arm draped over her shoulders, and dim lighting, everything filtered and polished. Like heartbreak never touched her. And now, here she was, unraveling in real time, admitting that the fantasy had ended. She kept going. It wasn't just about romance, she said. He pushed me into a world I wasn't ready for. Parties, people I didn't know how to talk to, expectations I didn't understand. I felt like I had to become someone else just to keep up. I was always performing. Every time I felt like I wanted to leave, he reminded me that I had no right. To turn back, that I'd already burned that bridge. My chest tightened. You mean he told you not to talk to me? Rowan nodded. He told me if I reached out to you, it would be a sign of weakness, that I'd ruin my new life, that I had to sever everything behind me if I wanted to evolve. And you listened. I did, she whispered. For years. Even when I missed you. Even when I wanted to hear your voice, just to feel human again. I turned away, swallowing the lump. In my throat, I waited for months. You know that, right? I checked your email login, saw when you opened my last message and didn't reply. I used to sit on the back steps at night, just wondering if I'd wake up, and it had all been a nightmare, if I'd roll over and you'd be there. But you never were. She was crying now, not hiding it. The mascara streaked beneath her lashes, her hands trembled. She looked small in that moment, not weak, not pitiful, just undone. Alden, I know I don't deserve your time. I know showing up here was selfish. But when I heard you might be coming tonight, I had to come. I had to look at you, had to see. If what I walked away from was still real, it was, I said, still is. I live with it every damn day. She reached out, and for a second, I thought she might touch my arm, like some nostalgic reflex would undo the years of silence. But she stopped herself. I'm not asking for anything, she said softly. Not forgiveness, Not a second chance. I just ... I needed to say it out loud. I stared at her. Why now? Because I think he's going to propose. That landed like a gut punch. And you're not sure if you should say yes? I asked. No, she said. I already said no. And now he doesn't know where I am. For a moment I just stood there, processing. She had said no. She'd walked away from the man she blew up our life for. And now she was here, not asking for me back. Just standing in the wreckage, wondering how far the damage really went. I exhaled slowly, looking around the room. The lights, the people laughing about things that didn't matter. I turned back to her. You should go, I said. Her eyes widened. Alden ... You should go. Before you say something else I can't forget. She looked like she wanted to argue, then nodded just once and turned to walk away. But before she made it out the door, she paused, looked over her shoulder. I'm sorry, she said. Not for leaving, but for how I left. You deserved a goodbye. And then she disappeared back into the crowd. I stood there for a long time after she was gone. I didn't move, didn't speak, just let the music carry on like nothing happened, but everything had. And something told me that wasn't the last I'd see of her. I left the event an hour later. After standing motionless by the wall like some forgotten decoration, I barely noticed Marcus trying to wave goodbye. I didn't hear the DJ switch to slower songs. I didn't care that I barely touched the food or that someone had spilled red wine on the welcome banner. I just drifted toward the exit like I'd stepped. Outside of time, I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast, just the low hum of the engine and the sound of my own thoughts slamming around like loose bolts. That was the kind of night where it's dangerous to think too much. The kind where you start rewriting old conversations in your head, imagining what you should have said, wondering if anything would have changed. It never does, but you play the tapes anyway, over and over. I barely slept. I kept seeing her face, that moment when her eyes landed on me and her world seemed to tilt. I've been waiting for that kind of recognition for 3 years. Now that I had it, it felt hollow, like she had cried for herself, not for what she did to me. And maybe I was being unfair, maybe not. I didn't know anymore. I just knew I was exhausted. The next morning I woke up to a missed call. No voicemail. Just the name unknown. Normally I don't bother calling back when I don't recognize the number, especially on a Saturday, but I had a feeling. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't block it. Hi, Rowan said quietly, her voice a little raw, like she hadn't slept either. I didn't say anything. I'm sorry, she continued after a beat of silence. I know calling is probably crossing a line, but I don't know who else to talk to. You left me, I said. You burned that bridge. Twice now, I know, and I'm not trying to rebuild it. I just ... I need you to hear something. I considered hanging up. I really did. But curiosity is cruel when it latches on. So I sat down on the edge of my bed and listened. He came home last. Night, she began. I was already back by then. I didn't tell him I went to the event. I didn't tell him I saw you, but I think he knew something was off. He started questioning me, where I'd been, who I'd spoken to, why I didn't answer his calls. And I lied, of course. I told him I'd stayed late at work and turned my phone off for a meeting, and he believed that, as she hesitated. He pretended to. But then he did something he hasn't done before. He checked my phone. Okay, and he saw that I looked up your name, that I opened your old profile, that I saved a screenshot of you from the event's website, the one with the name tag. He lost it, Alden. Like really lost it. A chill went down my spine. What do you mean? He yelled. He broke a glass, said I humiliated him, said if I was even thinking about contacting you, I could pack my bags and go. And did you know? Her voice cracked. I apologized. I promised him it was nothing. I lied again. I'm good at that now. I rubbed my eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because I need to know that I'm not crazy, that I didn't imagine how unhappy. That seeing you last night wasn't just nostalgia or guilt, that it meant something. I stood up, pacing now. Rowan, I don't know what you want from me. Want to know if you've moved on. My chest tightened. What difference does it make? Because if you have, maybe I can finally start trying to forgive myself. I almost laughed. You don't need my forgiveness to live your life. You made your choices. You left. You said yes to him. You told lies. And now what? You want me to pat you on the back and say, "It's okay, Ro. You're still the luminous girl I once married." I don't have that in me anymore. There was silence. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. I get it, she said finally. I do. I just thought maybe. I don't know. Maybe we could talk, just once, without all the old weight between us. I don't know how to do that. I whispered, I don't know how to talk to you. Like you're not the woman who shattered me. I understand, she said. I'll stop bothering you. I was about to hang up, but then she added almost too softly to hear, He's not who I thought he was, Alden. I froze. She continued. It started small. Controlling things, little things. What I wore, who I talked to, what I posted. Then it was tracking my locations, asking why I had male coworkers, telling me the person I used to be was weak and dependent. And now, she said, voice trembling, now I'm scared to leave the apartment for more than a few hours. Scared. To speak unless I've rehearsed what I'm going to say. Scared to breathe wrong. I sat down again, slowly, carefully. You're saying he's abusive? She didn't answer, but silence said enough. Have you told anyone? I asked. No, you're the first. I swallowed hard. Rowan, if you're in danger. I don't think he'd hurt me. Physically, not yet, but emotionally. She laughed bitterly. I haven't felt like a real person in a long time. And suddenly something in me shifted. I didn't know if it was empathy or muscle memory, but I stopped seeing her as the woman who left me and started seeing her as someone who was trapped, someone once loved. Not saying this to fix anything between us, I said quietly, but if you need help, real help, you can call me. Not for closure, not for romance, just because no one deserves to live like that. She didn't respond right away. When she did, she was crying again. Thank you, she whispered. We sat in silence. For a moment longer, just two ghosts on opposite sides of a phone line. Mourning something neither of us fully understood anymore. I should go, she said eventually. Yeah, I'm sorry, Alden. Again, the call ended. I stared at the screen, her name still glowing like an ember in the dark. She had walked away 3 years ago. Now she was coming apart, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. 3 nights passed. I didn't hear from her. I told myself it was for the best. That she'd probably patched things up with him or talked herself out of whatever bravery she was trying to summon. I tried to stay focused. Work, laundry, a book I've been reading for months but never finished. Anything to keep my mind from circling back to her voice trembling through the phone. But on the 4th night, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. No food delivery, no visitors. It was nearly 9 p.m. and raining, that kind of soft, persistent drizzle that feels like the world is sighing. I peeked through the peephole. Rowan, soaked, shivering, holding a duffel bag in one hand like she hadn't fully decided what to do with it yet. I opened the door without speaking. She looked up at me, rain dripping from her eyelashes. Left. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, cautiously, like she wasn't sure whether she belonged. She didn't look like the same woman I used to know, not exactly. Something in her posture had changed. She was smaller, almost folded into herself, as if shame and fatigue were stitched into her skin. I offered her a towel, and she nodded her thanks. As she dried her face, she glanced around the apartment. It looks different, she said quietly. You've never been here before, she hesitated. Right. We sat across from each other on the couch, not touching, not speaking at first, just breathing in the heavy silence. I couldn't do it anymore, she said finally. I packed my bag while he was still in the shower. I didn't leave a note. I didn't tell him where I was going. I didn't ask why she chose me. I already knew. You can stay here tonight, I said. Not looking at her, but just tonight. I wasn't assuming anything. I nodded. Good. She stared at the floor for a long moment. I don't expect you to fix anything, Alden. I don't even know if I expect forgiveness. I just... ... I didn't know where else to go, and again, I didn't say anything. I just sat there with this woman, who used to be my whole world, now a stranger. In my living room, she eventually fell asleep on the couch, curled into the corner like a child hiding from thunder. I covered her with the old quilt my grandmother made, the one Rowan used to love, and turned off the lights. As I lay in bed, I kept waiting for the weight in my chest to lift. It didn't. She was here, but I wasn't sure I wanted her to be. That terrified me more than anything. When I woke up the next morning, for a split second, I forgot she was there. The sun slipped through the blinds in my bedroom like it always did, soft, pale, unbothered by the wreckage it touched. I stretched, ran a hand across my face, and then I heard it. A cupboard closing gently in the kitchen. Reality returned like a cold splash of water. I sat up slowly, my chest tight with some mix of dread and confusion I couldn't name. For the first time in years, there was someone else in my apartment in the early morning, not just anyone. Her, I stepped out into the hallway, barefoot, rubbing the back of my neck. Rowan stood at the counter wearing one of my old hoodies, the navy one she used to steal when we were still married. Her hair was messy, her face free of makeup, and she looked normal, almost like she belonged. She turned when she heard me. "I made coffee," she said, then hesitated. "I remembered how you like it." I didn't answer at first. I watched her pour it carefully into the same chipped mug I'd used since she left, the one I never got around to replacing. She handed it to me with 2 hands, as if it weighed more than it should have. I took it, sipped, and nodded. We stood there awkwardly, like old classmates forced into a reunion neither of us wanted to attend. Finally, I sat down at the small table by the window, and she followed. "I didn't sleep much," she said. "Me either." She tapped her fingers nervously on the side of her cup. "I kept thinking about what you said, about how I left, about how I erased you." I didn't respond. She looked up. "You were right, by the way. I pretended you never existed so I wouldn't have to look at what I did. It was easier to act like you were just some phase, some mistake I grew out of, but you weren't. You were the one person who actually saw me, even the ugly parts, you say." "That now," I muttered. She nodded. "I deserve that. I do." I said all the right things to justify it back then. Told myself I was outgrowing you, that you were holding me back, that I needed to evolve. But the truth is, I just wanted attention. Someone made me feel exciting again, and I chased it like a drug. I set my cup down. "No. You don't have to rehash. I lived it." She bit her lip, then leaned forward slightly. "I never asked what happened after I left. It was a fair question, but I didn't want to answer. Still, part of me wanted her to know. Not for sympathy, but because I was tired of pretending I came out of that clean. I moved in with my cousin for a few months," I said. "I couldn't afford the rent on the house, and I didn't want to live in a space that smelled like your perfume. I sold the car we picked out together because I couldn't stand seeing the passenger seat empty. I took a job I was overqualified for, started therapy, and cried on the train more times than I'll admit." She looked down, visibly shaken. "And eventually," I added, "I stopped waiting for the sound of your key in the door. That was the hardest part." Rowan nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "You're a better man than I deserve." "Maybe," I said. "But that doesn't mean I know what to do now." She hesitated. "I don't know what I want from you, Alden. I really don't. I'm not here to rebuild what we had. That version of us, it's gone. I'm just trying to feel like a person again, like someone who still matters." And that's what hit me hardest. Because for all the hurt, all the lies, all the silence, I saw it in her eyes. She was broken. And for some twisted reason, so was I. I stood up, walked over to the sink, and rinsed out my cup. "You can stay a few more days," I said quietly. She didn't say thank you. She didn't cry. She just nodded. But I could tell that small act meant more to her than anything I could have said. And as I stood there watching the rain start again outside, I wondered whether this was the beginning of something or the beginning of the final goodbye. Rowan didn't leave that day, or the next. I kept telling myself I was just being kind, offering. her a place to catch her breath before she figured out her next move. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. There was a part of me, a tired, bruised part, that didn't want her to walk out again, not without something resembling an ending. Or maybe I just didn't want to feel abandoned twice. She didn't overstep. She cleaned up after herself, stayed quiet, spent most of her time on the couch reading or scrolling through her phone like someone trying to avoid reality. We didn't talk much, but there was an unspoken agreement between us. This was temporary. It's unclear, delicate. On the third night, I came home late from work. She had made dinner pasta with way too much garlic, just like she used to. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure how to respond. The smell alone sent me spiraling. I hadn't shared a meal in years, and now here she was barefoot in my kitchen, stirring noodles like no time had passed. She looked up. I didn't want to assume, but I figured you wouldn't have eaten. I nodded stiffly. Thanks. We ate quietly, her across from me, eyes flicking up now and then like she was measuring how much of me was still mine. I kept my head down, counting bites just to fill the silence. Halfway through the meal, she put her fork down. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I stayed? I didn't answer immediately. All the time, she nodded like she already knew. I do too. There was no romance in her voice, no longing, just regret, heavy and bare. She leaned back, folding her arms. I ruined us, didn't I? I looked at her for a long moment before replying. Yeah, you did. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just sat with it, letting it hang in the air between us like smoke from a fire still burning under the surface. After dinner, I started washing the dishes, but she came up behind me and gently took the sponge from my hand. Go sit, she said. I've got this. I watched her for a second, the quiet movements, the tired kindness, and then I did what she asked. But even as I sat on the couch and listened to the sound of running water, one question repeated in my mind. If she asked to stay longer, would I let her? And if I did, what would that make me? A week passed. Rowan was still in my apartment, sleeping on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin like a barrier. She hadn't once asked to move into the bedroom, and I hadn't offered. We were both cautious, like two people handling glass that already had cracks in it. Every conversation was delicate. Every silence was heavy. But something had shifted. I noticed her laugh again, not the forced kind she used in corporate circles or with people she didn't trust. I mean the real one. The one that used to slip out when we watched old cartoons at midnight or when she burned toast and pretended it was extra crispy. Oh, that laugh was buried deep, but it was still in there. And me? I didn't flinch when I heard her key turn in the lock. I didn't tense when I smelled her perfume. I didn't feel like a ghost inside my own home anymore. One morning, quiet Sunday, she sat across from me with her knees pulled up on the couch, her mug cupped in both hands. I found a place, she said. It's small, but it's mine. I nodded slowly. That's good. I move in next week. I didn't say anything right away. I just sipped my coffee and waited for the familiar sting of abandonment to return. But it didn't. Not this time. I wanted you to know, she said. I'm not staying because I'm lost anymore. I'm leaving because I need to learn how to stand on my own. I looked at her, really looked, and I saw it. Not desperation, not guilt, just someone who had finally stopped running from herself. You're not the same woman who left me, I said. She smiled softly. I'm trying not to be. We sat there in silence, but it was different, now comfortable. Grounded. After a while, she reached into her coat pocket and slid something across the table. It was her wedding ring. The original one. Not the one I found on the sink the day she left, but the one I gave her in that little vineyard in Vermont with trembling fingers and a voice cracking from nerves. I kept it, she said. I couldn't throw it away. I didn't pick it up. I just stared at it, remembering how hopeful we once were. And yet, somehow, despite all of it, I didn't feel anger. I felt gratitude because I survived, and so did she. I think we did the best we could, I said finally. Even when it didn't feel like enough, she nodded. Thank you for letting me stay. For not hating me. For still seeing me. And I meant what? I said next more than I'd meant anything in years. I forgive you, Ro. Her eyes welled up, but she smiled through it. Then maybe I can finally forgive myself. When she left that afternoon, she didn't cry. She didn't look back. And neither did I. But we did hug. The kind of hug that says, thank you, I'm sorry. And I hope you'll be okay. All at once. She walked out into the cold with her coat zipped up, keys in one hand, her life in the other. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. I didn't go back to being who we were. We didn't